Yorana, bonjour, kia ora koutou, a warm greetings to you all. I'm going to talk about my recent master's research on the diet and dental health of the Māori dog, or Kurī, in Te Ika-a Maui, North Island in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So, the Polynesian dog that accompanied the first ancient Pacific navigators to Aotearoa from the mid-13th century are known to Māori as Kurī and have an undeniable significance in Māori culture and history. In Māori oral traditions, Pacific explorer Kupe, often credited with discovering Aotearoa, is said to have carried his dog with him on the long and challenging voyage from Hawaii. Other historical accounts and traditions highlight the significant role that dogs held in Māori society prior to European arrival. And across the world, there is a range of evidence that highlights how dogs, the oldest animal domesticate, have captivated human society for millennia. To give but a few examples, dogs are seen as companion animals, hunting aids, for haulage, as sources of wool and food, as well as ritual activity. Outside of Aotearoa, a strong focus on domestic dogs is encountered in indigenous contexts. This includes specific detail on their appearances, as well as such as the well-known Seshat dogs or wool dogs in the Pacific Northwest Seshat traditional territories. Similar to Kurī, the hairs from these dogs would produce wool and textiles such as blankets worn during rituals and ceremonies, and often traded and gifted as prestige items, as well as for regular use. So returning back to Aotearoa, we see similar yet unique aspects of dog husbandry and interactions with Māori. The archaeological record can further highlight the importance of dogs in Māori society as a source of food, their fur used for dog skin cloaks, bones as artifacts, and they are depicted in rock art and carvings as shown. And the movement from the small islands of tropical Polynesia through to the vast and varied Aotearoa New Zealand landscape presented altogether novel opportunities for human-dog relationships to move in new directions. And dogs were widely dispersed throughout the country during the colonization process of early ancestors of Māori. And although dogs are highly valued, dog bones and teeth are often uncommon in Pacific Island archaeological sites. And that suggests that they were likely kept in small numbers. And on some of the region's smallest islands, they were initially introduced, but then disappeared rapidly over time. And we also know that Polynesian dogs in Hawaii had caries or cavities from a diet rich in starchy carbohydrates. So it's interesting to see how Kurī compare in relation to these other Polynesian dogs. So that brings me to the remarkable distribution of dogs in Aotearoa. You can see from my survey of dogs through the cultural sequence that they rapidly dispersed across the length and breadth of the country within the first 200 years of human arrival. They're also found in early human occupations on many large offshore islands, including the Auckland Islands. The distribution maps showcase some distinctive patterning where Kurī are most abundant on Te Waiponamu South Island, specifically along the eastern seaboard, where settlements map onto areas rich in large fauna, or which might provide access into the interior areas of prime moa habitat. However, Kurī are also well represented in the subtropical North Island, though in reduced numbers relative to Te Waiponamu. They were, however, particularly abundant at the 14th century settlement of Hauhora in the Northland, where moa hunting was an important activity, but also the use of dogs. And you will see that there are a reduced number of dogs between about 1450 AD and 1650 AD, which is another interesting aspect, but we won't get into in this talk. However, you can see a marked increase in dogs after 1650, with Kurī again well represented on both the North and South Islands. And this late pattern is consistent with observations of the earliest European visitors who describe instances of Kurī accompanying Māori in varied contexts. And Kurī are still seen to be relatively abundant from the archaeological remains through till the 19th century, and these distributions align quite well with Māori histories. Some of these sites include formal burials of Māori dogs and puppies, further highlighting their significance. And these distributions represent significant environmental changes that Māori faced following the extinction of all species of moa, the loss of other bird resources, and the collapse of seal rookeries, as with the onset of the Little Ice Age and changes in society with increase in pa or fortification and horticulture as well. So I wanted to find out how Kurī faced through the environmental transformative changes that Māori experienced, looking at North Island Kurī assemblages with permission from Māori iwi tribe groups, the Auckland Museum, and senior archaeologists that I'm grateful for who are caring for these collections. Specifically, I was interested in seeing how Kurī diet and stress regimes might be altered. And this leads into what teeth can tell us. So teeth preserve quite well in archaeological deposits. They often survive long after the supporting structures degrade. And I use non-destructive methods to identify dental markers. And these results can be integrated into multidisciplinary approaches, including isotopic studies to gain insights into dog husbandry and health, which we have recently contributed to, as you can see. So for my research, I looked at 8 North Island archaeological assemblages for various time periods throughout Māori history prior to European arrival. And one of these sites, Kohika, here, will be mentioned a bit more in detail later. And I analysed approximately 135 Kurī individuals, and using the University of Auckland reference collection and age guidelines from pioneering work on Kurī by Jan Arlo and Professor Jeffrey Clark, I was able to age most individuals. And the North Island assemblages consist of relatively young dogs. So I conducted the analysis on the premise that dog developmental stages like birth and the post-weaning period in dogs, along with environmental conditions such as seasonality and disease, shape the life history of individuals and are reflected in their teeth. Additionally, stresses that can impact an individual can be accelerated or inhibited by animal management practices and changes to regional or local environments. So I looked for evidence of cavities or caries and dental plaque or dental calculus, and evidence of periodontal disease, tooth wear, as well as wear can come from scavenging in gritty or sandy soils. And I considered a condition known as linear enamel hyperplasia, and this results where the formation of tooth enamel is interrupted. For example, when an individual has a poor diet, disease, or a bad infection. And this was the first time that this condition was applied on Kurī teeth. So my results indicate that there were no caries or calculus in any of the specimens. This contrasts to analysis on archaeological Hawaiian dog teeth where caries is present and illustrates dietary and oral health differences in Polynesian dogs. There's no severe instances of periodontal disease in the North Island Kurī, and that's consistent with previous research where this condition has only been found in a few individuals from the South Island and associated with extreme tooth wear and diet. And overall, the North Island dogs exhibited quite light wear, with some dogs from Kohika having more pronounced tooth wear, even in young dogs. And this suggests that variation in wear reflects differences in the environment rather than age. And so just to show you the differences in the skulls, on your left is an adult dog from Oruarangi, one of the sites, and that individual has very little wear. You can see the cusps are still retained, compared to one of the dogs from Kohika, just showing you that extreme wear, and that indicates regional environmental conditions. So a more direct indicator of physiological and nutritional stresses in both dogs and humans is enamel hyperplasia. In the sizable northern Aotearoa assemblages, it occurs in low frequencies, being found at one early site and 2 off the late sites. The 2 types of hyperplastic defects observed were pit-type defects that you can see on your right-hand side. Your left, yeah. Here, a pit-type defect, and linear enamel hyperplasia, bands of reduced enamel on the teeth were the types identified. And The results suggest overall healthy dogs from the analyzed assemblages. So I also looked at the timing of crown formation for the development of tooth enamel and the subsequent timing of enamel hyperplasia. And the results indicate that incidences of enamel hyperplasia in North Island dogs were concentrated around the timing of post-weaning. And no defects observed on both deciduous and adult dog teeth developed in utero or in the womb, suggesting good maternal health of Kurī. And that means, in other words, that the mothers of these individuals analyzed were healthy and any physiological stresses occurred after those individuals were born. So to gain a better understanding of the wider context of Kurī in diet in the North Island, I looked at available work on dog coprolites. And there is dietary variability across the North Island sites that is possibly related to both anthropogenic and natural environmental conditions. Fishbone, scales, and fish teeth are present, you can see, in the Kurī coprolites throughout all time periods, and that's consistent with historical accounts, which frequently mention that dogs were fed fish, and dogs will often self-forage for fish. Other coprolite components help explain the moderate tooth wear patterns observed in our assemblages. The extreme wear observed in the Kohika dog teeth may relate to consumption of shellfish, along with ingestion of sandy sediments and possibly tough grasses, further highlighting this regional variation within the North Island. So coming back to insights on dog husbandry, my research considers these 5 dental markers that are tooth wear, periodontal disease, caries, calculus, and enamel hyperplasia. And these markers provide insights into dietary change and overall health in dogs and indirectly inform on human management practices. And the study shows that dogs remain an integral component of the ancient Māori world prior to European arrival. And also the quality of dog diet and health is generally high, but there is some geographic variability. Specifically, there is little temporal variation, but the Kohika site stands out, pointing to differences in Kurī diet, experiences, and husbandry practice. Also, there are some differences in the diet and oral health between Kurī and Polynesian dogs in Hawaii, for example, and that highlights further variation. So studying the Māori dogs adds to emerging global conversations about humans and dogs being the oldest animal domesticate and their place in indigenous communities around the globe. The Aotearoa case offers insights into dog-human relationships at an intimate level with the absence of many other domesticated animals and provides another lens into the world that Māori occupied with their canine companions. So I'd really like to acknowledge tangata whenua, as particularly the local iwi who supported this research and the wider archaeological community, my supervisor Melinda Allen who's here, and just maururu roa, thank you so much for listening. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa.